huge players in this as well, in his story, Ari's story, are people like Bill Clinton. If you look at the history of Bill Clinton, I've written a book called Clinton, Bush, and CIA Conspiracies. So I researched the hell out of the Clintons. If you go back to when he was an AG and a governor of Arkansas, I mean, he was coked up, psychopathic, essaying and R-wording women left and right. One of his methods was he would get them to hotel rooms, promise them jobs, helping him with his campaigns, stuff like that. And then he would assault them and R-word them, etc. And there was people can research Juanita Broderick as one example of this, but there are so many others. And Trump brought them to that debate with Hillary because a lot of them had signed NDAs. They were all sat there together. But Bill Clinton, he's a guy who, when his half brother Roger got arrested buying the white powder, saying to the undercover cop, "My brother's got a nose like a vacuum cleaner. Some of it's for Bill." When that all came out, they had a crisis meeting and they said Roger's got to do some time to show that the Clintons are not above the law. But what they were actually doing behind the scenes were the CIA wanted the most corrupt state to be doing their drug drops, and they settled on Bill Clinton in Arkansas as the sleaziest, corrupt, drug-addled, easiest to compromise because of all of his sexual activities. And they were bringing the drugs in. People may have seen that movie American Made, Barry Seal. I've spoke to Barry Seal's son. That movie was a complete whitewash. The CIA were bringing huge quantities, huge kilos of the white into Arkansas, including to Mena. And Clinton was providing the state security for the drug drops through the Arkansas troopers. And a lot of my research is based on the testimonies of these troopers and bodyguards of the Clintons. Well, at least the ones who are still alive, or what they said before they were unalived. So what happened was these drug drops were going quite smoothly. And then two kids come across one of the drug drops. This case is called The Boys on the Tracks, Don and Kevin Ives. And they were murdered. And then they were laid side by side on the train tracks. A tarp
over a drug deal gone bad, right? Wasn't it?
Yeah, because they come across a CIA drug drop into Arkansas that was protected by Bill Clinton. Yeah. So they were laid side by side on the train tracks, a tarp put over them. A train ran over them. And the Clintons had this coroner called Fahmy Malek. And Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton's mom, she unalived someone when she was on a shift, when she was working in the health industry. And Fahmy Malek came in and changed the cause of death and saved her career. So the Clintons and Fahmy Malek were like this for years. He's the kind of guy who, if you've been shot in the head, he would say that you drowned in a swimming pool accidentally. This is how far he would go for the Clintons. So what he said about the Boys on the Tracks was they'd smoking so much green, they'd gone into a psychedelic trance. They laid side by side on the tracks and the train had run them over. But the crew that came, the ambulance crew, they knew because the blood wasn't fresh that something was wrong. One of the boys' dads worked on the tracks. He knew something was wrong. And Linda Ives, God bless her, she was following Bill Clinton around, going to his speeches, hounding him. But he just kept giving her the slip. And to this day, she's never got justice for her son. But yeah, Bill Clinton on the Lolita Express, a couple of dozen times, doesn't have his security guard. He's got girls with East European sounding names on the flights, like Svetlana, etc. We know what he was up to. Trump, probably a beauty pageant predator partner in crime with Epstein. There's probably a lot of embarrassing stuff out there that he doesn't want to come out either. But, it's just all one big club. And they're all tight together with Epstein.
Yeah, sure seems like it, man. And I'm so glad you started talking about Clinton. We'll get into some things that don't look good for Epstein's associations with Trump maybe in a little bit. But the thing that I just can't get over, man, is it goes so far beyond like the pictures of what we see from that hot tub that came out with Clinton and with redacted faces. I wonder who that could be. That's probably like, an elderly man, right? No, I don't think so. I think they're protecting these supervillains. But the thing I can't get over is that information leaked much later than it should have, that Epstein had 17 visits to the White House under Bill Clinton, arranged by a guy that also mysteriously died, Mark Middleton, who was found when Epstein went down and when he was found mysteriously died shortly thereafter. This guy was found hung with a belt and shot with a shotgun through his chest. How can we explain that, Shaun? Everyone in this case just mysteriously kills themselves.
So I believe that the Clintons were selling nuclear codes to Israel. I believe that the Clintons were selling technology they shouldn't have been selling to China. And Epstein was in the mix, brokering deals. And the man he interacted with the most was Mark Middleton. And in the hashtag Clinton body count, two of the most insane cases that it's so obvious these people were unalived and it was made to look like self-unalivement when it wasn't. Mark Middleton and Vince Foster. I mean, Vince Foster was found, and in the way his body was found, but the blood had gone the other direction and solidified. He didn't have any dirt on his shoes. He was found in a park. He didn't have any dirt on his shoes that he'd walked over the park. They believe that he was actually having an affair with Hillary. This goes back to Rose law firm. And when I was writing about the Clintons, I was looking a lot of what Larry Nichols was saying. So Larry Nichols worked for the Clintons in ADFA, Arkansas Development Finance Authority, which was put out publicly to increase jobs and boost the local economy in Arkansas. But what was actually happening was people were washing the money from the Colombian marching powder through ADFA and through Rose law firm. So Larry Nichols said that you paid so many thousands of dollars to the Rose law firm to process your loan. And if it was approved, you then got a loan from ADFA that you never had to pay back. And the amount of money in the banks in Arkansas at this time, when they were bringing all this white powder in, and this operation was orchestrated by George Bush. Under him was Felix Rodriguez of the CIA and Oliver North, who kept records in his diaries of the kilos of the white stuff down south. So I believe it was because the Clintons, this corrupt, evil, psychopathic family, partners in power, played ball with the CIA and the Bush crime family. They managed to parlay that into getting into the White House. And if you want to understand how evil Hillary Clinton is, the women that Bill Clinton was either having affairs with or assaulting when he was in Arkansas, Hillary had private investigators track these women down, not because she was jealous or anything. What she did was she threatened their lives. Pets were murdered. People were thrown off balconies, all because she wanted to prevent any kind of problems stopping the rise to the White House. When Bill was hospitalized with nose damage from snorting the white, Hillary went to the hospital and had lined all the staff members up and said, if any word of this comes out to anyone, you guys will never work again for the rest of your lives. And Clinton is such a bizarre character. Bill, one of his fetishes was, when he was on these coked up rampages, he would go with plus size ladies of the night that were ladies of color and have them humiliate his tiny Tinky Winky.
All right, that is something that some guys dabble in at this level of society, I suppose. It's like everyone has their own taste, and it's just so insane, man. It seems like that blackmail is the name of the game, whether it's Epstein or people close to Clinton, close to anyone. That was Roy Cohen's, strategy. He was the mentor of Trump. We talked about that. And it just seems like there's so many things in these Epstein files that show, contrary to the traditional narrative, which is just a bunch of baloney, that Epstein was involved in blackmail. Here's one that we see from one of the email releases showing that we know Trump was Landon Thomas, who was a journalist, got in touch with Epstein and had a long-term correspondence with him. And at one point, Bannon did as well. Bannon was part of some kind of resuscitation campaign for Epstein after he was convicted and given that sweetheart deal. He was trying to resuscitate his image by scrubbing it of condemnable things about Epstein's past, about the truth regarding his sexual crimes. And we see Steve Bannon talking about, can you get rid of Powell or really get rid of Mnuchin? He's implying right here that Epstein has blackmail on prominent figures. Powell is the Fed chair. He still is today. Mnuchin was the Secretary of Treasury under Trump in the first term. And then you have Alex Acosta, who became the Labor Secretary after admitting that he was told to lay off Epstein in that first case, where there was over 40 witnesses, by the way, to attest to Epstein's crimes. So what does this tell us? Blackmail is just the name of the game, isn't it?
It is indeed, but you give us an insight into the mindset of these demonic, psychopathic predator characters, because they view us as cattle just to be utilized for their own pleasure and disposed of as they see fit. They don't think about the harm they're causing to the survivors and the knock-on effects to all the other people surrounding them. It's like David Icke describes, the reptilians, but they've not got any empathy. It's a spiritual thing. So if someone, for example, on our wavelength, our frequency, and I've got a 2-year-old baby here, so I'm thinking about child safety a lot. If we hear someone gets convicted of crimes against kids, we automatically distance ourselves from that person. They're a threat. They're ostracized. We're going to protect our family members and keep them at a safe distance. But what did they all do after Jeffrey's first conviction, the sweetheart deal that was done by Acosta because it was above his pay grade and its intelligence? What did they all do? Did they all distance themselves from Epstein? Absolutely not. If you look at the emails that were released towards the end of last year, you got people like Fergie, Prince Andrew's Fergie, saying she was pretending to feel sorry for the survivors because she was releasing a book and didn't want to harm the prospects for this book. But Jeffrey, I love you. I'm gushing all over you. Can you give me some more money? Because I'm such a spendthrift and I'm so spoiled and I'm in the royal family and I can't spend money fast enough and I just want to be in debt to you for the rest of my life. Oh. And then you've got Prince Andrew, who tells his royal protection officers after they warn him that Jeffrey's got this conviction and they shouldn't be going over there, he overrides them. So he can go out there and be the guest of honor at Jeffrey's house party, not so he could go over there and break up his relationship with them. The thing is, Dave, people like Prince Andrew and Fergie, they're very low IQ. So they've got all this power in the world, all this money in the world, all this fame, and they think they can talk down to us like we're just going to swallow their BS and believe it. But when Prince Andrew did that car crash interview on the BBC, and people just posting on Twitter pictures of him out in casual clothing, pictures of him sweating, and all this other stuff, it's the old predator world versus the activists and the human rights people who've got now weaponizing themselves with the technology that we've got online.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned this, man, because there's so many disheartening aspects of the Epstein story just on a human level, also as it ties into corrupt, governmental policy. But you spoke to something that is just so maddening. And sorry if you can hear the dogs there. It's just that, people surrounded this guy in droves, very prominent people. Harvard carved out a special office for him after this conviction was known about. He clearly had preferential treatment, just as he received from, Donald Barr when he got his first job teaching at the Dalton School. And then when he was elevated somehow from being a failed options trader at Bear Stearns to becoming a partner within, a matter of months. It's just so inextricable and unexplainable to the extent that I told this to a different guest I recently had, Shaun, is like, if you made a movie about Epstein's life and really the elements we know about Epstein's life, or made a novel about it, it would just be considered too unbelievable. Like how much all of his life was totally inorganic. Don't you think that's right?
Yeah. And, there are so many names that are omitted because Prince Andrew's always in the spotlight, and then perhaps Clinton a little bit. But yeah, Prince Andrew's getting hammered here mostly. But if you look at Virginia's book, one of the most savage allegations, and they call this person the prime minister, and us researchers believe it's Ehud Barak, former Israeli prime minister. This is a guy who not only essayed and R-worded Virginia, but throttled her, choked her neck while he did so. And that's what aroused him the most. And when Virginia went back to Jeffrey, all injured and in shock at what had happened, she thought she was going to get killed. Epstein said, it's part of your job, just get on with it, and made her see him again. I think it was Lady Colin Campbell who put out the theory that Virginia was actually unalived by the Mossad because of the allegations against the prime minister, because they figured that people would know it was Ehud Barak. And it was done in a way, her unalivement, to look like she'd done it herself, through the pharmacide kind of methodology. But the other thing was, Lady Colin Campbell said that the media, which is controlled by the cabal, had been lined up to hammer Prince Andrew when Virginia's book came out, which they did, to not mention Ehud Barak or any of the other people that you touched on. We've got Marv Minsky, for example, in academia. Jeffrey was interested in AI, transhumanism, baby farms, cloning, etc. Bill Gates, whose own wife outed him, when they were in their proceedings for going over there so many times, and how it really bothered her. Why would he be going over there? We've got Juliet Bryant's mum came on the other month and said to us, look at the state of the island and look at the 5-star luxurious conditions these elites are used to. Why would they go to that grubby island for anything other than this conveyor belt of teenage girls? And then we've got Leon Black, who's supposedly a financial wizard, who gave Epstein hundreds of millions of dollars for financial advice.
You can't make that up. The Leon Black connection, I think, like the legit federal narrative, like the standard narrative, and from Leon Black, is that he gave Epstein $158 million to do his taxes because he was some kind of tax wizard, despite the fact that Leon Black was the head of Apollo Global. Right? It's too absurd. And Les Wexner gave him the most expensive mansion on Manhattan, countless other millions, again, inextricably. There's been lots of stories about how Epstein may have been his lover. We just don't know, but it really could have been extracting blackmail, having compromising information on these people. And the FBI, the feds, still have not interviewed Les Wexner about any of this, despite that he was named as a co-conspirator for a while by the FBI.
In 2019, yeah. So
in
the
2019.
Les Wexner story is really fascinating. So for people who are not familiar, he formed the company called The Limited, and that just became huge. And it branched out into the various other companies, including Victoria's Secret's brand. Wexner's recently made billions from AI through his investments in CoreWeave. But one of the methodologies of Epstein was to get teenage girls and pump them up with hopes of becoming top models, extricate them from their parents. I mean, Juliet Bryant's mother told us that she spent over an hour on the phone with Epstein before Juliet ended up flying around Africa with Epstein, Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, etc. And Epstein and Maxwell were R-wording her and essaying her while they were going on all of this. Like, she spent over an hour on the phone with Epstein, and he was just really polite, educated, telling her about his philanthropy and how he was sponsoring these young women. But the feds were involved in this because if you look at the second procurer in charge, I would classify Ghislaine as the poster child for human trafficking, and Jeffrey's number one. But number two was Jean-Luc Brunel. So Jean-Luc Brunel was the pipeline from Europe, and he would scour, the East European countries in particular for the most vulnerable families who were willing to give up their daughters to go to America on these false hopes, these pipe dreams of becoming top models. And the US federal government fast-tracked these women into the States, their visas, where they ended up in the Wexner property and other Epstein properties, and ended up with these heinous things happening to them. And, it just shows that the US government, the whole apparatus, goes absolutely to the top.